Buongiorno e benvenuti. Welcome to Art Yoga Pills with me, your host, Binny. In this space, we will connect and share together about creativity, inner child, and self-awareness. Siete pronti? Enjoy! Ciao a tutti, kia ora, and welcome to a new episode of Art Yoga Pills. Today I'm not alone. I have with me a very special guest. I have Joan Greaves. How are you, Joan?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank
Really
you so
good.
Thank you so much for being with me today. And I feel really blessed because I had the opportunity to do a really short training with you, but that time allowed me to discover not just something new, but also a person that I'm really curious to have a chat with. And I guess that to begin our conversation, even for the curiosity of our listener, my first question will be pretty easy, and it's going to be up to you if you wish to discover it towards your personal or professional life. And my first question for you is simply, who is Joan?
Oh, who is Joan? We're made up of many parts, and our lives intertwine and make us who we are. That's where I sit. So I'm a mother and a sister and a grandmother and a trauma-sensitive yoga facilitator. I'm a nurse. I'm a therapist. I'm a human being, and I like to think I am a human being with curiosity, and I think I learnt that from my dad. My dad left school when he was 13, and he said the way forward is education, and he continued to educate himself in his own way from when he was 13, and so I'm curious.
Thank you so much, Joan, for your sharing. And I really love your beautiful way to describe yourself, not just by the title that are part of who you are, but also everything that else that you are resonate with yourself today. So thank you for that. As you mentioned briefly about one of your title, which is trauma sensitive yoga, which was also for me the way of discovering a little bit about that, and especially doing it with you, which to me was very important. And I'm wondering if you would like to share of how that came into your life, if was a connection that you always had, even just towards yoga, or not, and how it came this opportunity to relate yourself with the trauma sensitive yoga into your life.
Absolutely. Gosh, that's a big, long story. So I'll start early. As a child, I grew up being kind of the caretaker in my family, and I became a nurse. And so my whole life has been about kind of healing myself, growing up when things were a little bit different, and some of the ways children were raised may not be approved of now, or maybe a little bit different. So I have my own history. And so I became a nurse, really good at looking after other people, but very, very mindful now that I didn't take a lot of time to look after myself. And then when I kind of reached my 30s, I came across therapy and realized that there was something more that I needed to do for myself. There was something missing, kind of the aliveness to live, rather than kind of robotically meeting the needs of other people. And from there, I trained to be a therapist, and then came yoga. And it was my daughter who kept taking me to yoga when she was 13, 14 and 15, and I reacted strongly to the presence of other people behind me, or people adjusting me, and often would not go back for a very, very long time. And it was in about 2014 that I decided that I could go to yoga if I did it my way. And that was about the time Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score was published. And I went, oh my goodness, this is what I'm doing in a way. And so I felt incredibly privileged that my life had taken me on that path through all these careers. And I trained to be a yoga teacher, and then subsequently went to Boston to train to be a trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga facilitator, which is an enormous mouthful. And the reason they use that term, TCTSY, is that it is an evidence-based treatment for complex trauma and PTSD. And what I'm beginning to do is kind of explain now the difference between trauma-sensitive yoga and TCTSY, because trauma-sensitive yoga, or trauma-informed care, as we might have in our hospitals, is about making some safe adjustments, making a safe space for people. It's not a treatment as such. It's kind of creating a space for safety. And we do that in schools, or we begin to do that in schools, to make it safe for children to learn. My own experience just recently in Maria Springs was in a sauna, and the beautiful yoga teacher and the sauna person guided us through this practice in the sauna. And what I noticed was how safe she made it with her language. It wasn't a treatment, but she was trauma sensitive. So you call her a trauma sensitive sauna practitioner. And when I spoke to her afterwards, after we'd done the ice cold plunge pool, that allowed me to stay in the water and the ice for 3 minutes, was I thanked her for her language, because the language meant I could get out anytime I wanted. And so what she said is, yes, she'd noticed over time that when she gave people a choice, then they actually stayed in the water, or they stayed in the sauna for longer, instead of kind of watching the clock and so forth. So trauma sensitive is kind of a way of being, and trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga is about an evidence-based treatment for complex PTSD. I'm just going to come back to you now. A big, long conversation.
That is a beautiful description, I guess, especially for those who never heard this term before and might be curious about that. And what I found fascinating is actually your journey of how that came to you as a way of supporting yourself instead of your initial career of supporting others, and now eventually combining the two things together. So supporting and being supported in the practice. And what I'm wishing to ask you in relationship with trauma sensitive yoga is something related also with the word trauma. And I wonder if that word might have scared perhaps some participant in the way that they are perceiving themselves even around that word, because I know that this is especially supportive for people who are possibly recovering from PTSD, but I also wonder if that could be a beneficial practice that other people might be benefiting from it.
Yeah, lovely. There's two parts to that question, I think. And one is the name trauma-centered, trauma-sensitive yoga. When they named that, it was to differentiate it from trauma-sensitive yoga, which was to make a safe space for doing yoga. And yes, the word can be activating for people. It can bring stuff up, and just the mere mention of trauma. And so just putting that out to people in this podcast, saying that actually, if you need to pause, if this feels uncomfortable, or whatever, you want to make a cup of tea, come back to it, then find the best way to take care of yourself. So yes, that mentioning of that T word can be activating. When we think back to, it's nearly 10 years ago since the research came out, and we've learned so much more. This practice is evolving with feedback from participants all the time. So it's been researched and guided by the feedback of those people participating. So that's the little bit I wanted to say about that T word. And in terms of, yes, it was developed for complex PTSD and is found to be as effective treatment as things like cognitive behavioral therapy. And the way I see it is that I don't need to know or have that specific diagnosis. If someone self-identifies as having had trauma in their life and want to give this a go, then actually that's their choice. And for some people, it might be too scary or doesn't resonate for them. Even though the practice has yoga in it, and we don't use any iconography or links to the language, it is grounded in the yamas and niyamas to make an ethical and safe practice. But for some people, that spiritual or religious component means that they don't want to partake in it. And I suppose in another way, it could have been movement-based therapy, or it had another name, but at the in the context of the time when it was written, that was the name that was pinned on it. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Absolutely, yes. And I guess that in this case, there are no right or wrong answer as for the practice. So I really like to just hear your sharing and your point of view on what I asked you, knowing that for me it's really appreciated, no matter the rightness or the wrongness of it. So thank you for that. And I guess
Yes.
that
I'm just going to acknowledge your trauma sensitive language of there is no right or wrong, and so often we're conditioned to be a right and wrong, and often sometimes in this practice people say, oh, just tell me what to do. But this practice is about checking in with yourself and knowing what you want to do and finding a way to know what's right for you, which may be different to everyone else. So in terms of my conversation with you, I really value that trauma sensitive lens of letting me go where I need to. So thank you.
Thank you, Joan, so much. And actually, that was going to be my next question for you, because from what I've noticed in my brief experience with this practice is that there is a lot of choice involved, and I wonder, especially the response to that choice. Sometimes it feels to me that too much choice is it can be quite overwhelming, and I notice as well how the importance anyway to have my own choices might impact the way that I'm empowering myself. So I don't truly know how to phrase the question, but my curiosity is around possibly the way that a class is led, in the way that someone might have an insight on the way that could feel welcome in such a space where there is such a high attention for the well-being of whoever is practicing TCTSY. Wow, I managed to say it, although I'm Italian and sometimes I struggle to say those little letters.
I suppose, the key concepts of TCTSY are choice making. But yes, when we have too much choice, it's a bit like we go to a banquet and sometimes, I use that word, or maybe it's a yumcha or perhaps a supper or a festival, and there's so much choice for food that it takes us a while to know what we want. And so people who've experienced trauma often will have not had a choice. Their wonderful nervous system has taken over and made an unconscious choice for their safety. And then to make a conscious choice can be with their body, can be really, really hard. So in terms of the group, it is titrated, and through attunement with the group and the group process, the amount of choice that's offered is adjusted. So, you know, when the first week of a group, I will probably offer choice in the shape of forms, maybe 3 or 4 times. But what underlies that, there's always a choice to show up or not. There's always a choice to practice or not. And there's a choice how you practice. And so all of those choices are layered. And often in the first week, you know, we're trained to be kind of good people and do what we're told, particularly in a yoga session. And so people do tend to follow what the facilitator does. But then all of a sudden this kind of magical thing happens, and people realize that actually it's safe enough to practice in a different way. And so sometimes the choice might be to lie down, put a pillow under your knees or a bolster and go to sleep. And sometimes it might be that you want to do a kind of standing lunge while the facilitator might be in a tabletop. So choice is key, but it is kind of titrated with the group as the group progresses. I'm just thinking of the other part of your question. I suppose in terms of choice, there's also a choice to notice what you feel in your body. And so when we've experienced, I'm calling it tea rather than the whole word, when we've experienced tea, it might be that you don't feel very much in your body, and that is okay. It's normal. We don't always feel things. And there's this opportunity for you to notice, or you can choose not to notice. If you notice, you might want to move that part. But the concept of interoception, as I see it, is the mind is going to that part and noticing that you feel something or nothing. And when we've experienced tea, often our body's being really protective and cutting us off from some of those real-time sensations, or responding as if they were happening in the past. So there's always a choice around interoception, how you move, if you sit in a chair, if you lie down. Yeah, choice. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joan. I guess even just by listening to your sharing around our own ability to find what is right for us in that precise moment, it gives me the sense, and here, of course, I'm guessing that the support of this type of practice is also beneficial for us out of the practice. So giving ourselves also the sort of empowerment that we can possibly have also on the outside world, not just like within the time frame of a session. Is that something that you also come across in your experience with this practice?
I do come across that people go outside of the practice and it's transferable. But the unique thing about TCTSY is that we're trained not to have an agenda, because we don't know what the best thing is for another person's body. We really don't know. And so it's creating that space for choice, noticing what it's like to choose, maybe noticing what you feel in your body, perhaps taking some effective action or choosing to move in a different way. And as David Emerson says, if there was to be one goal, it would be to have a present moment experience. And a present moment experience is when our physical and neurobiological physical reality all aligns. So we're physically present, our neurobiology is present, and we're emotionally present, because what they say when that's happening is trauma from the past is not happening. Yeah. So, but yes, I have stories of people who tell me things that have happened. Recently, someone who has had a long history within mental health services. And sometimes things people do, we might think, oh, well, they shouldn't have done that or whatever, from our own expectations. So not having an expectation when you're delivering this for someone to take it out. But when they come back, acknowledging it, but not kind of, well, you can do that all the time now, can't you? Not making that assumption. So this person goes to a class at night, let's say a dressmaking class, and finds it really, really challenging to be in a class at night. And then one day, after doing this practice for some time, decided that they weren't going to go to the class because they were tired. And so what someone might say, well, actually, you've signed up for this class, you paid for it, you should keep going, da, 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 da. But actually what was wonderful about this was this person recognized that their body was tired and they went to bed early. It's not that they're not going to go back to the class, but they were taking care of themselves, rather than doing or meeting the expectations of others. And I suppose another way was that comes to mind, there's 2 or 3 scenarios, and all of the people have shared that I can share these, but I do also make some of the details a little bit different. So someone who sometimes in the practice we do a standing mountain or standing moanga, and this person came to me and said, when I'm at work and I've had kind of a difficult situation, I sometimes just go to the lift and I stand in there and I find my way into my standing moanga, my standing mountain, and I breathe and everything's okay. And there could be that sense of going, yay, you've got that, you can do that all the time. But actually it's acknowledging, wow, isn't it amazing you've found that, rather than and that's helpful for you, because it might not be helpful next time. We don't know. And there's many ways we can take care of ourselves. So that's taking it out. And another scenario was someone who thought they were a head walking around with a body, and they came to the sessions, and I think they came to 2 groups, so that would be like 16 sessions. And when I asked for feedback, they said, one day I was walking down the street and I realized I had feet. Now, I can't comprehend what that must be like. I realized I had feet. I wasn't just a head walking around with a body. And I looked down at my feet and I could see my feet moving. And all of a sudden, I felt different. And I went to my therapist and we talked about it. And it changed my life in ways that I'm going to say, me as a yoga facilitator, I'm not sure these are their words, but I couldn't have expected. And what they said was they learned to be physically active. So from there, they became physically active. They were able to be closer to their partner, and they were able to engage more fully with life. So people do take it out, I believe, into the community, because as they begin to feel more in their body and they have a place of knowing what they want, they can make choices. But coming back to TCTSY, the practice is not, it's not cookie cutter, and it's not telling people what to do. it's enabling them to feel safe enough to notice what they feel in their body or what they don't feel, so that they can have an experience of their own. And part of the practice, being in a group or being with another person and connecting with your body can be really, really scary. So, even coming into the room or a group and maybe lying down is a huge accomplishment for a person often. I'm not sure what the question was, but there's my answer.
And I really like your sharing, even using like real life examples to describe a little bit the ability for us through whatever practice, but in particular this one that is designed for it to become more present and more connected with ourselves, but also acknowledging our own care and well-being to decide what is most appropriate for us, even in terms of posing, which is something that due, of course, to the modern time that we are living in, sometimes is something that we are living at the end of our day, or at the end of our month, or the end of our week, and not recognizing how it is important also during within an hour, how it is important for us to take that pause, take that break, and breathe, even just be present to ourselves. So I really appreciate your sharing, despite what the question was.
Thank you. Thank you.
And John, I'm guessing that arriving to this point in our conversation, I'm wondering if there is anything else that you find important to share that I haven't asked you yet, but you might
Yes.
wish to use this opportunity to share with us.
Thank you. Just as you talked, then you mentioned breath. Breath is so important, and there are many there's a whole lot of research happening out there about breath and control of breath and how it changes things. Absolutely okay. But in this practice of TCTSY, we offer an opportunity for people to notice their breath, but also an opportunity for them not to notice out their breath. And often by doing that, what we find is people begin to notice how they're breathing. So a little bit like, rather than instructing people how to breathe, there's an opportunity to explore breathing. And when we do that, we often will make that with a movement so that people can choose to add breath or ignore their breath. And part of the reason is that when we control our breath, it can change how we feel. When someone else is controlling our breath, it can also, saying what you have to do, it can change how you feel and may put a person into a place of activation. And we're not wanting to do that. And also noticing their body and their breath for good reason. If they've maybe if their breathing has been affected for some time, then trying to change it would be so critical. It would be kind of like telling them they're breathing wrong, whereas their body is breathing just fine. Yep, we can do different ways and we can develop, but at this point, in this practice, it's non-coercive. It's an opportunity to explore. And, I've had people come back to me and say, thank you so much, Joan, for teaching me how to breathe. So there's that language of power where they assume I've taught them. But actually what they've done is they've noticed that they're holding their breath, or they've noticed that they're taking shallow breaths, or they've noticed that they're gasping, and they've changed it. So this practice is about being non-coercive. And I think that the 300-hour training, the 20-hour training gives you that kind of trauma-sensitive lens. The 300-hour training gives you the TCTSY Facilitator qualification. But it allows you to work through lots and lots of layers of understanding. It sounds incredibly simple, and I thought it was really simple when I started the training. But as a therapist and a person, it's changed my life. It's changed how I relate, and it's changed how I work as a therapist and a yoga teacher. So that's all.
Thank you so much, Joan, for that. And I have to say, yes, I only attended to the 20 hours, and it already in that little time frame that I had shifted the way that I always perceive even the role of the facilitator. And it was a really beautiful way of unlearning something for once, because as a facilitator, you're assuming that you are guiding people by leading them, but actually there is like guiding people to be with them, and I really enjoy that component of the experience that I had.
Yeah, I think, from where I come from, that curiosity, the more I know, the less I know, and the more there is to learn. It's and that's given me that the TCTSY training has really allowed that lens to open further. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joan, for your sharing. And I have a final question for you that I never reveal beforehand, so that it keeps it a little bit juicy for us. And it might not be truly in line with what we shared, but I really would like to explore it with you to see how it lands this almost three-part question. But the idea is, if you feel comfortable, to share with us three empowering messages as a reminder for us today, even starting from a reminder that you can give to yourself, and possibly me and everybody else who is listening at this point. And even here, it doesn't matter how small or big those empowering messages are.
Okay. Oh, a juicy question. You are enough. And your life has put forward ways for you to learn how you've lived. Your experiences are an opportunity to grow, no matter how hard and difficult that's been. I believe we can all grow. We're all here to grow for all of our life. No matter how old we get, there's still so much more to learn and grow. And I think the other bit is, we all have choices, but sometimes, like when I became a nurse, I became a nurse because it was something I could do well, but I didn't know I had choices. I didn't know that there was another choice, or I didn't know I was making a choice. So I'm not sure how that lands, but knowing sometimes not making a choice is making a choice. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's a bit cryptic.
To me, it makes sense, and I hope that our listener will appreciate or interpret this as they wish for today. But I really appreciate your sharing, and that's what I meant of no matter how big or small they are, to me, they all land really well. It's also a really big reminder for myself. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and much easier than I thought. Yeah.
Thank you so much, John, for your time. And thank you for our listener. I hope you will gain insight from this shared experience with Joan. All the details to reach out to her will be below the description of this episode. So in case you wish to know more or get in touch with John, everything will be available for you. But thank you everyone for listening, and special thanks to you, Joan, for sharing about you with us today.
Grazie per averci fatto compagnia. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. If you wish to stay updated and connected, visit us on our social media channels and our website www.artyoga.co. Ci sentiamo presto. Ciao!